Well, hey everyone, I'm Leah Potter-Weight. I'm going to be talking to you today about the Fruit and Nut Compass project. Some of you who were here last year might have heard me give a little nutshell on it. So there's been some, changes. We've been working on it. So I'm here to update you on what we've been doing and also work with you on the economic planning tool that we have so far. So it is a rough draft version. I think we said in the schedule we'd send you home with one. We're not going to exactly do that, but we are going to try to have at least a rough out before the spring, and you're welcome to leave your emails on the surveys I pass out, and we'll try to get you something before planting season, but just know that it won't actually be published until winter of next year. And even then, it'll, like anything good, it'll be updated throughout the years. But Fruit and Nut Compass is funded by a SARE grant, and it's funded through next year. And I am a graduate student at UW-Madison, and I work with the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems, and I collaborate with folks there to make it function. We have two main goals. One is the economic planning tool. We're going to focus mostly on that. I do think it actually really complements Matt's well, and it's really, really important when you're thinking about perennial crops to do some thoughtful economic planning, because it is a lot of upfront costs, and you're going to want to be careful and not pour your money down the drain and see when you're actually expect to see profit and when you're going to start being able to cash flow it, and think about what you're going to do in the meantime while you're waiting for things to produce, how you're going to make money. So I work on that with Jim Winch and John Hendrickson. John is here in the back too, and farmers are an imperative part of this. They give feedback on the tool, and just keep us on the right track. And then the other component of this is more qualitative. It's on the principles of success. So we've been doing a bunch of farm interviews, and we've done 12 so far, and I have a different team for that. You might recognize the name on there. And farmers, of course, are a really, really crucial part of that as well. So I'll start with the economic side, and then we'll move into the more qualitative component. We are not doing this alone. We are standing on the shoulders of others always. And so there's some really cool economic planning tools already in existence, and they're worth checking out. One is the Hazelnut Budget Builder from Jason Fishbach. He's probably also talking about that downstairs. And then there's a non-timber forest product calculator. And I'll just show screenshots real quick. This is the Hazelnut planning tool. It's great. It divides it into different phases of production. It's a very clean format, and it's specific to hazelnut, so it will really help you see over time. It spits out a net income graph at the end and helps you see when you can expect to make profit on your hazelnuts. So we like this format, and we're gonna format ours similarly, the buttons and the phases. This is the non-timber forest product calculator, which is also very cool. It's preloaded with 6 different crops. I don't know, can you guys read that all the way in the back? No. Okay. It's pussy willow, dogwood, pawpaw, elderberry, hazelnuts, and persimmons. And there are actually preloaded budget sheets in it that give you ideas of cost per plant. But you can edit them. So it prompts you with budget sheets, but you can edit the actual cost. What you cannot edit here is the crops themselves. So you're working with those 6 crops. Something we really like about it is the slider tools on the far right. It lets you manipulate the survival rate, so you can see in real time how the survival rate affects your annual equivalent value, which is similar to cash flow over time. So, yeah?
Going back to that real quick.
Sure. What's up, John?
So in addition to that slider on survivability, there's also sliders where you can adjust the interest rate.
Yeah.
And see how that impacts things over time. And also no sliders on the price that you get per unit of the discount. You can see how the numbers change based on the price.
Yep. And we will be incorporating some of that into our tool also. So the Fruit and Nut Compass, the economic planning tool we're building, we ask for certain input, and most of the things you'll be working on is costs. It's kind of no fun to think about, really. It's really complex to consider costs, and it takes a really long time to map out all your costs. The revenue part is actually pretty easy to input relative to costs. You just figure out price and market, and then boom, you have your revenue, but costs get complicated. So we ask that you consider all the input So the actual plants themselves, the compost, these are just some examples. The tractor you're gonna get, and then are you using the tractor for all the crops or only using the tractor for half the crops, one of the crops? The nut wizard that you might get, because it's super great and harvests nuts so well. And then we're gonna spit out an output, which is mostly gonna be a cash flow graph and a net income graph, and then also budget sheets. And just a quick summary of cash flow versus net income. Cash flow is how cash actually moves over time, whereas net income incorporates into it non-cash expenses, things like depreciation, things like writing off bad debt or prepaid expenses. So this is actually a graph of Amazon's cash flow and net income. Interestingly enough, they are doing really well on cash flow and don't make a lot of net income, which is actually probably good for the taxes that they don't have to pay, and shows that they also make a lot of money. So I think cash flow is, I mean, it's particularly important because you want to know if you're actually going to be able to cash flow your operation. And then we're providing options similar to what John was just mentioning, the slider tool. So we're going to be able to, you're going to be able to manipulate yield and cost and price and see how that affects your cash flow and your net income over time. So I'm going to pull up the tool. All right.
You gotta.
Oh. Where's my punch here?
I got my first 6 starters with hunting power. I wasn't expecting anything at the time.
So I'm actually, for the tool, I'm gonna work with you on building some costs into this budget. So the tool itself, it has preloaded into it some costs, but you're gonna have different ones. You can edit them, you can add to them, and so collaboratively we can work together to think about how it works. So just in general, the format of it is that you'll be handed a file, and in that file you'll have multiple crop files and one master file. So every crop gets its own worksheet. So this is a worksheet for one crop, and in this case, I'm made up of black walnut variety called Super Squirrel, and that's what we have here. So you will do this for the Super Squirrel black walnut, and then you'll do another whole worksheet for a different crop, and then another one for a different one, and they all feed into your master sheet. Because we've learned that you can actually do that in Excel. That was pretty cool. And so this right here is going to move you through establishment, and then pre-production, production, and then have you consider crop-specific capital expenses. So I'm not, in these first few pages, really concerned with capital expenses, and all the general costs of the farm don't go in this crop-specific sheet. They go in the master file. So this is Super Squirrel Black Walnut. I just decided in our 15-year timeline that the whole thing is built around, we're gonna establish it in year 1, and we have ways to determine your plants per acre. We give you a couple options here. Either you can go through and put your row spacing, plant spacing, number of rows, and rolling, and then that'll spit out your row feet, planting acres, plants per acre. Or if you've been in SketchUp and you already know because of the nursery number that Matt was talking about, you might already have all that information. You can just plant it in the bottom, in the bottom, and then it'll spit out your plants per acre. And if you move over here, you can feed that information here. So for plants, you plug in your number, your unit cost, it totals it out. You can do that for tubes if you're planning to get tubes. And then below that are all other establishment item costs. So it's actually, I've been messing with this since yesterday. It would actually read this. So
Question on that item list, is that per acre or your total?
it's your total. So we don't currently have a per acre setup. We are gonna provide guidance in here for how you can go from a per acre budget sheet and plug it into your operation to get your total. So this is total for the year. So that's your annual establishment cost. Yeah, we considered that format. We're not totally opposed to it yet, but we're not planning to do that so far. So, yeah, we're hoping that people actually look for their own costs. There are a number of budget sheets, and I'm going to show you a couple right now. But I'm also going to talk about why we feel that they're limited. So, there's a piece of literature by Jeff Jensen called Landowner's Guide to Perennial Crop Options. So this is great because it can give you some prompts. You can think about, oh, stakes. You know, stakes wasn't preloaded into the tool. Maybe I should think about that. And it gives you some actual prices of these items. And something really important that it does here is it says 50 plants per acre up at the top. So if you know your plants per acre, you can do some quick, behind the scenes calculations and figure out what your costs are going to be.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I think Jeff's here.
Yeah, Jeff was here. I don't know if he's here today.
Maybe you can make it.
I hate
But
Okay.
the comment I want to make is, I'm almost positive, if you go to the Trees Forever site, the Iowa Trees Forever, they have an agroforestry tab, and that's all accessible.
That's it.
Right,
Yep.
so all those worksheets are there.
Yep.
There's some case studies and some worksheets that are there.
Thank you. And then this is more from Jeff Jensen's book. So it's the salt and black walnuts. It actually does it over time. So it has your cost. So these can be really helpful for prompting you to think about what the items are, what the cost can be. But we really want to encourage people to actually go and search, talk to your neighbors who are their suppliers, find out what they're buying and what you want to buy and look for those costs because they change a lot year to year and supplier to supplier. So, the phrase garbage in, garbage out, if you just do sort of casual numbers, and it might not give you what you need at the end of the tool. So being detailed is helpful. And then there's also this tool. Where does it keep going? You have to watch me dancing in South Africa. All right, thanks, Kate. There's another tool out of Missouri, the Black Walnut Acquisition Support Tool. Matt sent me this. It's been an interesting one to explore. And this has a preloaded budget sheet into it, so you can't change the cost. But it's another way you can actually look at what costs other folks are considering for black walnuts. And you can use those as a baseline, but do your own research. And then the other thing is you're probably going to be planting crops that don't have budget sheets at all. So then you really are going to have to do your own research to figure out what the costs are. So can folks in the back read this at all? No. All right, well, I was going to have the whole team, everyone together, try to come up with some establishment costs for items that you don't see listed here. So, and it can be anything. Maybe, you're thinking about your own land and you don't see it, but I'll just tell you what they are in case you can't read them. So it's fertilizer and lime, mulch, weed control, irrigation, deer control, and soil testing. Can you think of anything else I might need to think about, or you might need to think about when you're establishing your operation of super squirrel black walnut?
Seed in the orchard floor.
Yeah, maybe some want to plant some grasses or something? Is that what you're thinking? Like grass seeds? And then that feeds in, if we're going to plant grass seed, that's also going to be labor. So the right-hand table is establishment labor costs. So maybe I'll go over there, and since I'm going to plant grass seed, I'm going to put that in, planting grass seed.
Equipment cost.
So, depends on what we're talking about, because we might want to put that in capital expenses. Because often we're not just going to plop all that money down in the
I was
establishment.
thinking like a tree planter,
A tree
that you would rent or something like that.
Oh, yeah, you were going to rent a tree planter? And would you rent the labor for it too, or just the item itself?
Usually you can get it, and they're not very much cost if the county keeps the people. It's a county extension or something like that. So it's not really the cost, I think it's just trying to win it, but I can see where you're looking at. Main equipment on the other sheet. be some small costs, so maybe seeding, you know, you'd rent a seeder or something like that, or
Yeah, I think that's a great
a
place to
drill or
put,
something like that.
yeah, that's a great place to put rentals. Yeah, if you were buying a tree planter, then it would be different, yeah. Anything else that you think about you might need for establishment? What if you have a mole problem? Maybe you need like a root shield or something for that root netting? Just throwing out there, these are just things that to think about.
How about food for all your friends that are helping you?
Pizza?
Come on, beer, it's beer.
With rotationally grazed cattle cheese for the pizza, of course.
Of course, good fight.
Great, and then we go into labor, and we have your hours per year for labor and the cost per hour. You might notice right off the bat that the first cost I put down is $21 an hour. And you might wonder, are you really gonna pay someone $21 an hour? And actually, I did that because I went through this worksheet that's called Calculating the Cost of Farm Labor, and it was actually made by John Hendrickson. That's here, and it helps you determine the true cost of labor beyond the wages that you're paying. I'm just gonna pull that up real quick. So, this is step 3, step 1. It has you go through the whole year for all your employees and put in all the hours. And then up here, which is a really important page, you put the pay rate per hour up at the top, and then any sort of benefits that you plan to provide, and then below you have Social Security and workers' comp, so they're already built into it that you're gonna have to pay. And then at the end of that, even if I start paying someone $10 an hour, the actual cost on me is because I'm also gonna be providing some food and HJ expenses and all of those preloaded costs, it's gonna be $21 an hour. So that's a helpful way to think about how much you're actually paying rather than just pure wages. So, any more establishment labor we can think of that needs to go in here?
I have a question. At the rate that this person, you're saying 50 hours to plant 150 trees, and they're planting 3 trees per hour, are we assuming they're putting down the mulch and the weed fabric and putting the shelter on all with that? Or are you going to separate, because if that guy's only digging a hole and putting the tree in,
It could take less, or a lot less time than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be. You can make it as detailed or not detailed as you want. And to be honest, I just threw 50 in there and I didn't give it an honest thought. So if you can make it just planting, have it incorporate everything, or you could divide it out and say planting and setting up irrigation and putting in compost. That's sort of on the onus of the user to make it how they want it to be. Any labor costs that you can think of that aren't here?
I know that sometimes when I'm sourcing my materials, I'm driving for it. And so that's something that I don't always think of, but definitely adds to the time.
Yeah. Transport of materials, it's a great one. And that brings up also that that's you probably that's actually doing that movement. And so this is an important thing to think about, and it's something that Matt mentioned too, like how much are you gonna pay yourself? And be kind to yourself. Yeah, you could put in 0 there and be like, whatever, my work doesn't matter, but that stuff adds up, and I think thinking about that is important. It gives you a chance.
Can the cost of your own labor be taken as a loss on your Form F or your incorporation?
It will be considered an expense here. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you're finding
Somebody that knows the tax law better than you could answer that question.
Oh, okay, you're trying to specifically tax. Because John Hendrickson has an answer in the back.
So this tool is not for preparing taxes. What you have on your tax forms is not for your labor.
Well, including your own
This
labor.
is to figure out for you and your household, are you making money?
Can we talk about taking losses on
I'm sorry?
Can we talk about taking losses on Form F?
You
manage
can't,
tax liability?
can't do
Can
your
we talk about
This
that?
workshop that we're doing right now, I don't think that's part of what Leah's talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it sounds like maybe John, who's been doing a lot of these economic planning tools, might be able to talk you through some of that later.
I think the Savannah Institute's going to be doing a series of webinars, and one of those webinars is on farm law, and so they may be handling some of that, because that can get pretty tricky, answering some of those questions if you're not certified to do it.
Thanks.
It's an important discussion.
It is.
Yeah, John?
There's two ways you could do this too. You could not leave your labor, you could not value your labor in this. And then hopefully at the outcome is that your net is going to be high. Then you have to think about, okay, I got to pay myself out of that net. Or you throw labor in at the beginning, and then your net income is going to be lower in the final analysis, but you've accounted for paying yourself in the budget process. Does that make sense for you?
Thanks. So the next sheet is all pre-production costs. This is the time when it's still growing, but it's not producing yet, and you're still accruing costs during that time. So some of the preloaded items are just a little different, like we have pest control in here now, and we have pruning. So are there other things you think that might come up as costs during this phase?
Mowing.
Mowing, yeah. A lot of mowing probably, especially for our farm. So we'll put mowing over here.
Maybe fuel for mowing.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So that one can go here. That also, we have a place for that later if you wanted to in capital expenses. We have a section for fuel and maintenance costs for all your pieces of equipment. So if you wanted to put it here, you could, then you would have to discount it later in the tool. And that would be sort of up to you. So I'll put it here now, but then we would have to know that for later. But that's it's one to think about, and maintenance, to be thought about it too. Yeah, so maybe you have to fix or replace tree tubes, and that could take some time. Can you replace tree tubes? Is that impossible to do?
You can do that.
It's making it hard to put trees back on a tree that's been around for something.
Yeah, you can. Okay. So, does anyone have another one for pre-production? All right, we're going to go onward to production. So this is a place where you can put the years until you have enough crop to sell. So we call that years until saleable crop. And looking at black walnut budget sheets, it looks like around 9 years you start getting crops, but it takes even longer to get a really large volume for black walnut. I'm sure depending on the variety. And this is where tools like MathBook can be really helpful. There's all sorts of information on how long until you get yields and how many yields you might expect to get. And so these are all costs that accrue while you're in production. So also really similar costs to pre-production, but on the right you see that we have yield-dependent labor costs, and we're actually expecting that folks will do this and enter those labor costs in as if their plant, their crop was in maximum production. Because essentially you're going to be able to manipulate things like yield later, and so we'll use that as your baseline. And so say you only get 50% yield, then we'll just reduce those costs by 50%. So what are other production item costs you might expect to see during this time?
Where the insurance cost that you put in there, is it an insurable cost?
Yeah, so insurance, where would that go? That's a good point. That could go in, it's not really a capital expense. typically do insurance, crop insurance?
About 3 years into production, some insurance is different, but based on 3 years of it.
Okay.
So you know what to get.
Okay. So,
And your
Don't
profit
insure
comes
until
from
after.
going up, so,
so you don't insure until after the production starts.
and your production's going up each year, so you never can actually insure for what you're going to be doing.
What happens if you have a tornado come through and wipes out your tree crop 2 years before you get the crop?
You're screwed.
Well, one thing you could do, but it is really worth thinking about, I'm really glad for that feedback, is you could average out those insurance costs over the years, because this starts at production. So you could enter insurance in here and then, sort of average it out and take the amount that you plan to start paying in 3 years and spread it out so that you can start in this year when production starts. So that's an option, but I'm gonna put it here because I think that is a good point. And maybe you can also just, for the sake of just getting the budget sheet moving along, you can put it in and say that you're gonna start paying insurance when production starts and look at the cost of that, as an annual cost. We're still mowing.
Oh, yeah.
You never stop mowing. So
Yeah.
my place, as soon as I finish, I gotta start the other. It's like the Golden Gate Bridge and start all over.
Still mowing. So the other thing that you could put, you could start putting, I'm supposed to be in class. I'm supposed to be in class. Okay. You could put certain harvest and pack items in here if you wanted to, if they were specific to walnuts. Or you could wait until the master sheet and say, you're getting wax boxes or crates and they're usable for all sorts of crops. You could put those later. But it is worth to start thinking about, are you gonna need bags, or what are you gonna need for your black walnuts once you actually start processing, hauling and processing them. Yeah.
What about delivering?
Delivering, yeah, I think that's a great one. So actual transport of the product, so that we'll put here. Because I would say that that's probably gonna happen, that's so dependent on the yield volume, it's probably gonna happen anyway. Delivery. Cool. So,
Specifically for black walnut, husking is going to be a very major expense.
bingo, yeah. It is gonna be a major expense. And that is then leading into our final step, which just is the final step for black walnut specifically, is the crop-specific capital expenses. So this is where you could put in, the huller or whatever equipment you're gonna get that's gonna be specific to black walnuts. You all know a lot more about these crops than I do. So what are other, equipment pieces used for black walnut?
Some harvesting machines to crack walnuts at my hand
Okay.
commercially.
So there's equipment. Is there equipment specifically for black walnuts, or is it modified?
People think that,
Okay. I'm curious, could it be used for multiple crops, or would it be specific to black walnut?
Probably flexible.
How would it be flexible?
Because you could use those net blizzards, you could use that back and track, separate thing they were showing, maybe.
Yeah. The sweeper would be able to pick up black walnuts. They'd be in the hull, of course, so you'd still have to have the huller.
And then that could be used for other crops too?
Yep.
Super.
Yep.
So then we might not put that here, we might put that in the capital expense master sheet, so that we're not applying it only to black walnuts. But these are things that the tool will prompt you to think about. Applying cost effectively and accurately. So then, this will stay on a budget sheet, which we haven't built yet, so I can't really show you yet. And then that will feed into this master file. And this is where you'll start thinking about your land costs and entering those in, and then your sort of larger capital expense budget. Jim Munch is rebuilding this. He's an economist. I trust him to know a lot more about this than I do. So this is just the initial one that it includes some of the information you'll expect to see here. The year you purchased it, the price you purchased it at, if you got a loan for it, the principal on the loan, the annual loan repayment, so that's going to include interest as well, and then depreciation. So you can either do sort of IRS version of depreciation, or you can choose to do it more based on the actual life expectancy of the equipment, which tends to be a longer amount of time than the IRS rules. And then fuel and maintenance. So this is what was brought up earlier. You could put fuel here if you wanted to. And then that'll spit out an annual cost for you. And we haven't decided exactly how we're going to allocate this across crops yet, but we'll either do it on a number of plants basis or an acreage, or maybe sales, but we're going to basically use a formula to be able to allocate this across all the different crops that you have.
But not all the crops would use this tool the same. Because like your pruning tool, you might be using a lot on the chestnut, the black walnut, but you're not going to use them on your current honey mustard.
Yeah.
So will that be taken into consideration?
Well, this is something we've been going back and forth on a lot about, because originally we had, after the capital expense sheet, we had this mega monster sheet that went after it with all of your crops and then all of your expenses, and you would go through and allocate. That's 480 cells that you'd have to fill out if you were to allocate it that specifically. And so we started to feel like we were going to scare people away. So we kind of backed off and thought, is there another way we can do this? It's more crude than the original one we had. So I think that's really worth thinking about, and we're going to keep, that's good feedback for us. We're going to keep thinking about it and see if we can come up with maybe a compromise that isn't a monster table that scares people. But does everyone sort of get what she's implying, what Kathy's saying? That there's going to be equipment that isn't specific to one crop, and it doesn't apply to all crops. And so it's worth thinking about how you're going to use your equipment. And if you're clever with Excel, you'll probably figure out some sort of behind-the-scenes way to look at that. In here, say you could go to your crop-specific sheets, and you could enter in like half the cost of a piece of equipment on your walnuts and half the cost on your hazelnuts. You know, you could kind of get clever with it and make it work for you. But we're hoping to make it simplified so people can do that. Thanks for bringing that up, Kathy. And then we're prompting you to think about markets. So this is probably crazy to think about. Like you're like thinking about where you're going to sell walnuts like 10 years down the line. But I mean, it's like Matt was talking about. These are important things to think about when you're planning your operation, to know if you can actually make your operation feasible. So those are actually, we can edit all of those different markets. We preloaded them, but you can do whatever you want with them. Say you want to do like wholesale to a retailer, but you also want to do wholesale to a distributor. Like you can get as specific or general as you want. Some preloaded items. Can you think of some other things that might? You pick. Yeah. Okay. So what do we call this in the? Oh, you want me? I'm gonna put you pick up here. If you haven't been to their new pick operation at Redfern Farm, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. You get a nut wizard and you get to scoop up chestnuts.
You scoop.
What?
You scoop, not you pick.
Yeah, you scoop. You roll.
Oh, I thought you said you used to.
Any other items that we can think about that might go in here?
Harvesting equipment.
Harvesting equipment.
Or if you pick, we have to have extra wizards so that all customers can have one.
And would you prefer to put that here as as an annual cost of the wizard, or would you want to put that in your capital expenses? How often do you have to replace a net wizard?
Couple per year,
You get a couple per year,
5 to 10% per year.
and do you know how long they last?
The customer's using about 5 years.
They last for 5 years? So that might be worth actually putting in capital expenses and just loading those couple you buy every year into the annual cost. But it could go either way. So I'll put that wizard in here. But it's just, I think whatever you decide to do, just don't double count.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you decide to do. Then we have a budget sheet that's not created yet, and what it spits out ultimately is all your different crops, and you can choose your price, and then these are going to be slider bars, those blue columns, where you can manipulate yield and price and cost. And you're going to get your net profit and your cash flow, and then be able to compare crops and compare markets.
This is so cool.
I love talking to fruit and nut nerds. Not a lot of my friends have that response.
We feel you, we feel you.
So that is that. Any questions on the tool so far?
Can you go back to the first output tab for a second?
Sure.
See it again.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So I have a question. The yield sensitivity analysis,
Yeah.
that's one of the things you can adjust.
Yeah.
How do you adjust that?
Well, it's going to be a slider bar, and you're just going to move it along. And so we're going to take all your yield dependent costs and just change them based on whether you decide to put 50% yield or 100% yield.
And that shows how you gain efficiency as yield increases?
Yeah, and how you should see increased profit,
That's
increased
the
cash
math.
flow. Yeah.
Will you remind us again of the timing of when this is going to be available?
It's by December of next year. But we're gonna do, we're gonna do a rough draft by, we're gonna try to have a rough draft done by spring. I don't wanna, it's not gonna be like pretty, I don't think. I don't know what it's gonna be by spring. I'm gonna work really hard to make it really good.
She has
Maybe
class
some
to
people
go
here
to.
could
Come
help
on.
you test
Go
it.
for it.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Has to be
absolutely.
pretty.
That's a big part, thank you for bringing that. That's a big part of this, is actually having people use it and test it. We have farmers that are taking it and testing it. And if you want to be a part of that, I am so happy to hear that. And I'm going to give you guys surveys at the end of this, and I have a space if you want to put your email there, and I'll send you what I have. If you can tell me if you want to be a guinea pig, or if you just want updates as we send things out into the universe. Yeah?
Eventually be freely available, or?
Freely, yeah. Alongside a suite of tools that John has made, the Veggie Compass and the Livestock Compass, that are also really great. The Livestock Compass is coming out sooner than this, right?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Do you know if this is going to play well with the Google version of Excel?
Yeah, I started in the Google version of Excel,
Okay.
and then I took it into Excel spreadsheets.
So people that don't have the Office suite will be able to use it.
They should be,
Cool.
yeah. But that's a good point. I think I need to go back and forth and make sure it really
I would
works
say that's
across.
another question, because we're not talking about just one sheet, but we're having a whole suite of sheets that are going to be in a folder that you're going to download.
All right.
There's crop sheets and the master sheet. I don't know how that works in Google Sheets.
That's a good point. But we'll test it and see.
Open Office, is that another?
Oh, yeah, we
Free.
can test it, we can make an open office version probably, and hopefully they have those same capabilities. Yeah. Cool. All right.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Let's see if this is good. So I've seen a lot of really intense, here's how to set up your farm business plan models at different points in time. And I know there's not a lot for agroforestry, but I know that there's some versions of this kind of tool out there, like maybe at Missouri or other places where you can go and see them. So I guess two things occur to me when I work with this with farmers and they're thinking about nitrogen, conventional farming, and are everybody was interested in the big group, but when it came to actually the time that it would take to sit down and go through and actually do every single field of your farm, which was what you would do in that case, rather than a crop here, people were just like, you know, we need somebody to do it for us, or we don't have time. And so in that case, we shortcutted to a lot of preload, not just, you know, just stuff that you put in and make it change. So there's that observation. And this one, I'm still kind of leading to the point of, is this what you think is most unique about the Compass model that maybe isn't available other places? This idea that you can get to this kind of final picture. Is that what's unique here? Is that what makes it worth everybody's
That's part of
time
it.
to go after this? You know what I'm, kind of know what I'm asking a little bit
Yeah,
here?
what's different, like why are we even making this
Well-
different? That's a good question.
I mean, it's just, how do we take this as our, we're gonna look at all these options, why is this gonna be the one that we wanna go with?
Well, I don't think it's the one. I'm gonna say that. I think we're working as a collaborative with a lot of these folks that are making these tools. So we're filling a particular gap. And I think the one we feel is that you can put in multiple crops of your own choosing rather than preloaded crops. And then that in combination with having this final output where you can manipulate with the visual in front of you and see what happens if you change yield, cost, and price. So you have this sort of immediate satisfaction at the end after you've done all that work. Does that answer?
I guess it gets at it. It might be interesting to start with this when you're doing these presentations and kind of tease people and go, look, this is what you're gonna be able to do.
Yeah.
Okay, here's how you're gonna get to it. You know,
Yeah.
here's gonna be.
Actually, you read our mind. We're planning to do that in the beginning of the tool, is have a picture of this, and then people will know that that's where their destiny. That's their destiny. This is what it is. Okay, cool. I want to just do I don't have that much time, so I'm kind of gonna rush through the other part of this presentation a little bit, but I'll try not to talk too fast. The other thing that I've been up to is the second half of the Fruit and Nut Compass, which is the qualitative version, or the qualitative research. So, oh wait, I guess I have to conclude on this. So, okay, she is here to remind us that we all decided to do this fruit and nut farming for the money, right? Like that's why we're here. Probably not. So the economic planning tool isn't about, you know, helping you get rich. If you want to get rich, like you might want to choose a different career path. And there are some money makers, and absolutely they're worth checking out. And sometimes people really strike gold in certain ways, but money is just one aspect of this. And I think most people in this room already know this inherently. It's one of the three legs. There's actual land use, so the environment and how we take care of the land. And then there's the community, the social aspects, you know, at the cider pressing party that we were having. And it's the three together that a lot of people are here for. And the economic planning tool is to help you see if you're going to be able to float it. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's a pretty vulnerable kind of operation to have because you're putting out a lot of upfront costs. You're not going to see profit for a while. So you're going to want to make sure you can actually float it and do some thoughtful planning, whether you use our tool or a different tool, or your own, you know, really thorough, you know, back of the napkin planning. But yeah, just encouraging people to be thoughtful because we don't want you to pour your money down the drain, but we do want to see these operations get going. All right, so the next part of this is principles of success. So this was my former supervisor, Matt McBoyne. He actually stepped down so he could go full-time into his cidery business called Bricks, Grape Cider. And that's Adrian from Elderflower Farm on one of our many interviews. So we've done 12 interviews to date, some of which are actually on video, and you'll see like Tom and Kathy from Redford Farm in our video. So expect a little mini documentary coming out soon. And these interviews have fed these principles of success. And so basically the three oldest farms we interviewed, one is about 30 years old, that's the Redford Farm. And then there's a 20-year-old operation and a 10-year-old operation. And those are the oldest ones. And so any theme that I found, I've been coding through themes, any theme that I found, I filter it through the oldest farms because I feel that their longevity and their sort of proof of sustainability is an important aspect of this. So think of them as having that success that we're going for. So the first of the 10 principles that I
Yeah.
coded for, deprioritize financial gain and have supplementary income. Like we're not that woman with the money, we're doing it for other reasons, and so if you're going into it for the money, you might want to consider a different career. And have supplementary income. This can mean a couple different things. I think there's some really creative things happening right now with grazing and raising meat as a way to float the operation before the fruits and nuts come to bear. Or people that are raising meat and selling the meat, and then they're hiring their livestock to do all the harvesting of the fruits and nuts. Is another cool operation that's happening right now. So that's some on-farm income. Or I was just talking to Megan, who I don't know if she went, but she's doing flowers, so she's gonna raise flowers in the interim while she waits for her trees to grow. Well, and then there's off-farm income. So all 3 of the oldest ones we talked to had off-farm income for at least 10 years before they were able to get to be totally on the farm. And one of them actually, they had just gone back after 10 years without off-farm income. They had to go back and get an off-farm job. So that is another thing to think about, how you're going to actually capitalize this whole operation. Build supportive relationships and learn from others. So build supportive relationships, that starts at home. You know, does your partner or spouse or family, do they support you? And you know, if they don't, maybe you want to reconsider going into the business, or just find a community that does support you. Find that social network that's going to make it possible. And then learn from others. Find mentors. That's a big thing people brought up. Like, find people that are doing what you want to do and learn from them. Join organizations and associations like the Organic Fruit Growers Association. Start slow and be patient. You know, start with a few trees, make sure things that are actually going to grow where you are. And be patient is a big one. The people that I know that I really admire in this work, they really love the challenge, they love the puzzle. And so even when things go wrong and they're learning through trial and error, it's all a part of it. So I think that farming is an interesting career in general, and agroforestry, in that I feel like it attracts really patient people, but it also breeds patience as well, because you're just forced to be patient. Understand and love the local ecology. So know your soil, know your climate, and then enjoy yourself. Like hopefully you like being a part of that ecosystem and learning about it. That's going to help you thrive, and I think you can learn to love it. Keep yourself inspired. Get comfortable with chaos, and that goes along with being patient. If things are going to change, you're working in a complex ecosystem. I think what's interesting now that we're sort of steering away from the conventional systems that are more streamlined and have these operations that are in place into something that, I mean, it's kind of old and it's kind of new, and it doesn't have as much streamlined options for you. So it's going to be more complex, and that's part of it. That's part of the puzzle. And I mean, I don't think any of us would have to be otherwise, but you got to get comfortable with that. Develop creative markets. Like you pick chestnuts, and where your main customers are from Asia and from Eastern Europe. You know, that can be your creative market, or it could be raising blueberries for cash crop while you have a number of other sort of more rare fruits. Or you could be really diversified. One of our oldest farms is extremely diversified. They do hogs and cider and vinegar, and then they also do fresh produce. So find your niche, develop a creative market for yourself. And then also if you want to have, another way to like capitalize could be like having a nursery, like Red Fern Farm does that too, and that can be really helpful. Be realistic about management needs. Every time you have a super cool idea for a new enterprise, that is super cool, and I encourage you to do that, but it also is going to need leadership and management. So be realistic about what every choice that you make, what its reverberating effects are, and who that's going to come down on. So you want to be a good employer and not put too much pressure on everybody. Update your technology and create efficiencies. So like 5-foot perforated tree tubes, like that's a big one that apparently you guys have been talking about a little bit. And it's something that Red Fern Farm brought up. And sometimes these things that come out, you'll learn it from associations or from friends and neighbors. They can be life changers. They can just be absolutely huge. So keeping your ears peeled, or just staying aware of what's happening. So they can be big for you. And creating efficiencies. So modifying equipment, building your beds so that they can fit the pieces of equipment that you're going to use. Matt really talked about this in a clear way, so that you're not having to buy a lot of different pieces of equipment. Be stubborn. That's people self-identify often as being stubborn or having a farming habit or an addiction. And I think it's an interesting personality quality to think about. You know, I don't know if you have to be stubborn, but persistence is really what it's all about. Like, you're going to keep going, and if you love it, you're going to keep going. So as everything ebbs and flows, you know, stay a little bit stubborn. Like, you're going to be fine. You're doing great. Last one is find balance. And this was inspired particularly by one of the farms, and it's a quote from the farm. I'll let you read it on your own. So I think that what we're doing is a movement that's supposed to last beyond our lifetime, and we should really think about that. And maybe we don't mind working super hard and working ourselves into the ground, but what does the next generation, what do they see when they see that? Are we going to bring more people in the door if we, you know, have a balanced life, and if we live sustainably and sort of more holistically? So find balance for yourself, but also to keep this a movement that goes beyond your lifetime. So this is my research so far, and this has actually led to what I want to do my thesis on, and it's the assumptions that are inherent in these principles so far. So there are a few assumptions that are sort of wrapped up in all this. There's an assumption that you have access to land. There's an assumption that you have the financial stability to not make money for 10 years and to deprioritize finances and to take the inherent risks that are part of agroforestry. And I was thinking about those assumptions a lot and realizing that one, it's so awesome that people have that. I'm so glad that there are people that I admire so much that are doing this work and they have that access and that stability so we can see agroforestry move forward. But what does it mean for people who can't say yes to all of those things? They don't have land access and they don't have that financial stability. And so what my research is going to focus on is how these principles apply or don't apply to different folks that are in this work across lines of race and gender and sexuality, to see if there's a different sort of set of principles and how we can create a tool and resources that are more relevant, more accessible to more people. And I think that that's actually really important in ways that I think a lot of people resonate with, and it has to do with the history of exclusion and oppression. So I have been telling some people this, and I've gotten the response that, well, Leah, there aren't a lot of farmers of color or women farmers in the area, so your work doesn't seem particularly relevant, but that's kind of the point, is that we have a history of exclusion and oppression of people, and we have a history of exclusion and oppression of nature, and the two are completely related. And I think that we have to, I think it's on everyone to think about them together. Because I think everyone here really feels moved to change the way that the systems deal with land. But if we want to change the system, we can't just work on how we relate to land. We have to also work on how we relate to people. So let's get more people in the door. Let's get more people able to do these sort of operations, so that we can actually more effectively and robustly change the system. And yeah, this is about more than humans related to land, it's also about humans related to each other. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions while we pass out surveys?
One thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to was if this